Hey, what is up? What is up, YouTube gaming family? It is K right here, back at it with another good video for y'all today. This is gonna be a little, political history type of video. As I got some Assassin's Creed 3 gameplay, showing the great Connor. Um, Connor Kenway. That's really his Assassin's Creed name. But his real name is obviously Ratahageron, and then obviously you see that little gem right there giving him all the information. I think that's called like the ancient orb that they have. But either way, yeah, let's get right into it. Also, shout out to YouTuber Shirako, good YouTuber. Definitely go check him out. I actually like watching him. And yeah, let's get right into it. So, for today's video, we're going to be talking some, historical context. And, this is probably going to get like a lot of people, debatey, in the comments, which I really don't care at this point because I think people are that stupid when it comes to genetics and understanding historical bloodlines and traits. But in today's video, we're going to be talking about the good old Caribbean with the Taino people. Um, so what we're going to end up doing is we're going to be talking about the Taino population within Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the DR, and obviously other parts of the Caribbean. Now, what's really going to be telling out of this whole discussion is a lot of, how should I say, a lot of people that try to criticize against them, i.e., the European, colonial, counterparts, where people that are racist and they have really poor beliefs. They like to say the Taino population, they're gone. The Spanish took them out, blah, blah, blah. All the stupid shit that doesn't really make any sense. But for the most part, we're really going to, break that down so that can be debunked because that is very well far from the truth, and I'm going to explain why this isn't to be the case at all. And I'll explain myself pretty well because this will be a video that not a lot of people are going to really understand because people have, political ignorance. And I think there is a political down syndrome when it comes to people that have colonial, retardation. So I think that's just part of people's mindset where they just don't understand history and they don't understand, genetic geographics. So yeah, let me break this down because some people, they're gonna start bitching and moaning. So yeah, but before I do that, be sure to hit the like. Yeah, be sure to hit the like button, share this video around, and let's get right into it. While I got this good old Assassin's Creed 3 gameplay for you guys. So yeah, let's get right into it. This is quite interesting, and the whole thing about the Taino heritage. For those of you that may not know, a lot of people like to say the Taino population was small. That's the stupid claim that a lot of people come out with. They say that the Taino population was not that big, and according to the Europeans, blah blah blah, they were not that big of a population where they were, and somehow the Europeans were just dominating them. And Columbus, with his voyage to the very first island which he went to was technically the Bahamas, where he met the Lucayan people, which the Lucayan, that is a branch of a heritage tribe of the Taino people within the Five Nations, if I'm not to be mistaken, of the the Taino Arawak bloodline. And just to make this a little bit more clear, when I say Taino, the Taino people was not a people that were classified by the Spanish, because a lot of people like to say the Spanish came up with that word. No, that is not true. The Taino came up with that word because the word Taino means good people, where if you break down the word, it's Tai, meaning good, and then Ino is more like referring to their own kind. So therefore, that's what they do say amongst each other, which not a lot of people understand, and they disregard that to say, oh, well, the Europeans made that word up. They just made it up because they just heard it. No. The Taino were saying that to each other as a form of cultural tribal, like inheritance. So that makes sense of why they did say that. But another thing that they have also said to one another is like, I don't know. You know, I mean, I'm not gonna go through all the language words because I myself have been learning how to speak it. And shout out to the other YouTuber if you guys ever want to take a look at her channel. Her name is um, Casa Areto. Um, if you just spell that for the last portion of that name, you spell it as Areyto. She's a really good YouTuber. She's actually one of very few linguists out there that does like YouTube research or personal research on the Taino language, and she's promoting it very well. And she's a very good YouTuber. Definitely go check her out. I like I like watching her videos a lot. Um, but she's a really good YouTuber. I actually like watching her. And yeah, let's get right back into it. So when it comes to like the heritage alone, the Taino bloodline is actually very huge, and the reason being of why not a lot of people talk about it is simply because they don't understand the origins of where everything had particularly started. And the thing was is that the ancestors of the Taino came from the Arawak bloodline, which stemmed from South America, which it came from modern day Venezuela. And Venezuela has a massive population of Arawak, American Indian bloodlines that were stemming from that land. But along with the Arawak came with the Wayu people, and the Wayu people, that being the American Indians that were basically related to the Arawaks, were actually the people that were basically concurrent relatives that were blended with the whole Arawak bloodline of being like very diversified within their own heritages, and then that basically spread within other parts of South America, where a lot of people would say, oh well, that's thousands of years ago. They're not related to each other now. Blah blah blah. No, that's not true. Like they were very well heavily related, and the reason being is simply because the Arawak bloodline, they traded amongst their counterpart nations within South America, and they've settled within other parts of South America where a lot of their heritages were very well intermingled with other tribes within the American Indian gene pool within South America. And, some people will say, oh, well, how do you know that? And, what nations have they settled? And the thing was, is that they settled throughout a good portion of South America. Um, Nations that would include nations like Curacao. The Arawaks have settled there. They've also settled in nations in possibly Guyana, I believe Trinidad. That's a good possible contender for that. I think Trinidad is very well close with the Arawak bloodline. Definitely. Well, yeah, I'm gonna put Guyana and Trinidad in that category of they could have been there, but I'm most likely certain that a lot of their historical lineages are very well connected with them, because a lot of like American Indian bloodlines were living within Trinidad and Tobago along with Guyana, but not a lot of research has been put into that, and not a lot of people really look into that. So I'll probably make like a video explaining about that historical lineage to be connected with the Arawak bloodline if they had settled there. I'm pretty sure they did, but I'll get back to that with another video. Um, so yeah, let's get right into it. The other nations that the Arawak bloodline that has settled within South America to spread their indigenous genes. That was other nations like, let's just say, nations like Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Colombia, other nations like, oh man, what's the other one? Yeah, it's Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, and then including Venezuela. And then I'm trying to think of the other one. Um, hmm. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Hold on. I'm just gonna basically find all the nations that I have, and I'll get back to you guys real quick. Hold on. Hey guys. Yep. So I'm back. So yeah, just going back off of like my research that I was able to find with where the Arawaks have settled within South America. Certain research studies that I was able to find was that the Arawaks had settled in nations like Venezuela, Curacao, Brazil, and then Bolivia, and then Colombia, and Trinidad and Tobago, and then possibly Suriname and Guyana. So right there, that's almost like about 9 nations throughout the South American region. And the thing is that um, what a lot of their heritages are very mixed with what they had brought within their bloodline, and a lot of people don't really acknowledge it because the European colonial invasion had tried to make it seem like it's not there, and tried to basically erase it in the sense of making it seem that oh, it was never that important to begin with, and therefore people should just forget about it. And that's definitely far that's definitely far from the truth, and it's a very disingenuous thing to say. So I think for the most part, a lot of people just really go out of their own way being ignorant. And the thing is that when people do look at the bloodline, they are very yeah, they're very disingenuous to not know what their heritages have really stemmed from. And the thing is that that's definitely not even consistent. um there's a lot of there's a lot of pure evidence to really show that the Arawak Indians have had a lot of expansion throughout South America. They've traded amongst lots of tribes, not only just themselves, but also other tribes that are basically cousins, to them in a way. Uh, those tribes being the Guarani tribe within South America. That's very common within Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, and uh, yeah, I was also gonna say Bolivia. Yeah, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, and Argentina, and I forgot some other nations that are there. With the Guarani tribe. They definitely do have like a strong influence with what they do, but the Guarani tribe definitely holds like a really interesting how to say yeah, they hold like a very interesting lineage with what they do. So for the most part, um, just to kind of make things a little bit simpler. Now, when I do talk about the Ottawa American Indian bloodline, a lot of people don't really understand, how do they manage to kind of make it all the way over from South America to the Caribbean. And it's quite simple. They've actually had a lot of good expansion with creating, sailing raft ships, in the sense where a lot of their, rafting boats that they created were basically made for the sense of, how should I say, it was made for the sense of they were trying to expand to other lands, and they were trying to understand what are some other places that they can go to expand their heritages, and to see where other life can be, or other geographic locations can be homesteaded for. And for the most part, That then came with the evolution of the Taino people, where the Arawaks have decided to go on to their big canoe boats and started to sail all the way over to the to the Caribbean, which then came to the early homogeneous homesteading of the Taino people. So the Taino people were not just this people that were separated from the Arawaks, and they were just their own people that just made it there because they were just there. No, that's not true. A lot of the South American relatives or the tribes alone within their own cousin bloodlines were very connected, where they all came together and then they started to move to the Caribbean, and therefore you see the Taino people of who they were. Now, to kind of make this clear before any historical revisionists try to be racist about it, to say, "Oh well, the Taino they were quote unquote mixed with other races, and therefore, you should really acknowledge that." Well, let me kind of pause this video, and I'm gonna show to you what they actually are to look like versus what they're not to look like. Give me 1 second. Alright, I'm back. So, these are some photos that I basically looked at on Google. But to kind of make this simple, this is what usually the average Taino does look like, compared to the past. You know, Predating from thousands of years, and this is what could be considered the. Well, no, not considered. This is what the actual homogenous, Taino man looks like. Very light brown skin, very dark black silk hair, very Asian looking, where they have like a lot of features with their traits and all that. And then they really carry a lot of their cultural how should I say, their cultural clothing, with like how they carry their huntsman gear, and then they have like their tribal tattoos. So that's what they do look like. Now, a human version of that could very well look like this. These are, definitely more, indigenous driven, Taino heritage peoples that could very well resemble close to what they do look like, because they are brown, tan skinned people. They don't hold any like mixture for like what they have, and therefore, they don't have like that, like that typical, like the Hispanic look of, okay, you look indigenous, but you're mixed with like a European bloodline. Granted, some people like to say, well, this isn't like a 1-to-1 match and you can't really compare that. That's not true. Everybody has their own differences with their heritages, and their bloodlines are to be resembled with who they are. But let me take a look at this photo. Exclude this lady to the right, because that's not clearly a Taino. That's clearly, a Hispanic woman that's white. But that is a Taino off to your left. That is actually, like indigenous. So that makes perfect sense. Their heritages are mostly dark brown skinned people that are tan. They have a very dark complexity of who, well, not really dark. They have like a light brown skin complexity that is tan, with them being, Asian driven, very Asiatic. It's like an Indo-Asiatic bloodline. That is what they look like. Now, when people try to lie about them, to try to say, oh, well, how about, Tainos that were other races that came in, like black people? That is clearly not true. And let me just show you like another good photo. This guy, he's actually like a Instagram content creator. I actually like this guy. I forgot what that guy's name is. I totally forgot what his name is. I think his name is man, I keep forgetting this guy's name. But if you guys go onto Instagram and just type in, Taino culture or anything like that, this guy's name will pop up. I just don't know what his name is. Hold on. Actually, let me go find him, and then I'll give you guys that information. Hold on. Alright, I'm back. So yeah, this Instagram content creator, if you guys ever want to take a look at him one day, His name is Amanax Ri. Um, take a look at. Oh my god, dude! Like I hate this crap sometimes. So if you guys want to take a look at that, that's his Instagram handle. If you guys want to take a look at that, definitely go take a look at him. He's a very interesting how should I say instant Instagram. I want to say he has his own YouTube channel, like content creator, and he basically breaks down a lot of like cultural heritage, bloodline, facts about the Taino culture. That's in Puerto Rico and other parts of the Caribbean. He does like a lot of great missions with what he does with spreading the knowledge and keeping the how should I say keeping the heritage very strong. So I definitely like him a lot. He teaches like all the survival how should I say I guess like survival mechanisms that Tainos have used within their cultural lifestyles. So he's a really good Instagrammer that does like a lot of great content, and I definitely like watching him a lot. But yeah, hold on, give me 1 second. I'm gonna go back to the Assassin's Creed video. I'm gonna pause it, and I'll be right back. Hold on. All right, I'm back. So yeah, hold on. I'm going to get back to Assassin's Creed, but before I do that, I wanted to kind of debunk this, political lying that some people like to do over the internet, lying about Taino culture. But as I had showed you that this is what Tainos actually genetically do look like, as their own heritage, as a people. There are lies that people do try to spread around through the internet to be, politically retarded and evil, to say that Tainos were African. So this is like basically what I'm saying. People like this do make up a lot of lies, trying to say that blacks are a part of that particular category, which I disregard that, and that is a lie that a lot of people put into that particular manner. And the reason being is simply because this is a form of historical revisionism that people like to lie into the heritage. So I think this is very disrespectful and very evil to, to the bloodline. And the thing is like, I don't really care if somebody claims to say that they are to be a heritage that they are. That's fine. When you lie about it and you say that other people can be a part of that bloodline, which I find that to be very disingenuous. That's not fair to the people that actually stood up for something, and they actually took in their bloodline, and they harvested their heritage, and they preserved it to the level of which people know their particular identity. You don't go out of your way lying about it to say that this is what people like this look like compared to what people look like up in this photo right here, or that other photo that I showed you right here with these men that are sitting, yeah, that are sitting in a picture, that are clearly Taino men. And the reason being is simply because like their heritage is American Indian, Asiatic. So they are Asian driven people that have a lot of heritage, lineage with who they are. You can't say that Africans can be within this particular category, because even if you try to make up the dumb claim to say that Africans can mix with them and therefore that counts, no, that does not count anymore. Those people are half breeds. They're not homogenous. So I got that picture out the way. Don't get fooled if people try to say to you that Tainos are black. They are not black. They are brown skinned American Indians that are Asian genetic driven people. That is what they are. That is what they've always been for thousands of years. They've been settling within the Caribbean for at least 5,000 plus years for their heritage to be very common within the Caribbean, and that will forever go on till well, basically, to infinity. So yeah, now that I basically got all this black whitewashing out the picture, which this is obviously colonial propaganda to say this, because blacks were never in the Caribbean at all before the Spanish had brought them in as slaves. So That's just talking out of somebody's ass where people are lying about it. So, for the most part, that's pretty much it, man. But yeah, let me get right back into Assassin's Creed, and I'm going to kind of break that down. Hold on, give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. So yeah, now that I got that picture out the way, I'm gonna kind of explain to you the whole lineage between Taino ancestry that a lot of people like to disregard. Their ancestors, that being the Arawak, American Indian bloodline, had made it to the Caribbean for at least 5,000 plus years. And when they have made it to the Caribbean, they have settled throughout multiple nations, that being Cuba, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Haiti, Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, the U.S. Virgin Islands, which there's a name for that, but I forgot what that name is. I would have to go back and actually do research onto that. But yeah, I mean, they have a lot of heritage within their bloodlines, within the people. Now, there was a competitor tribe by the name of the Kalinago that were basically enemies to them. And before anybody tries to say like, "Oh, well, here we go," the Taino, they had like, all these bad beliefs and blah blah blah. That is not true. A lot of them were very hardworking people, and I'm gonna kind of get into like the whole deal with like what happened when they did settle, because they did have their survival tactics put into place. They were very diplomatic people, and they had to structure, their society however they needed to structure it, where it was very like decentralized. They traded amongst their people. They had, a good marketized structure in terms of people owning property and people, homesteading property. So it's not like people were just kind of in violent collectivist tribes, kind of like what you've seen within North America, where people didn't have a choice in the manner. No, people settled in their lands and they created lands however they needed to basically create them. So the whole deal was that when they did settle, they had to come up with a lot of fast solutions in terms of what they needed to do. And a lot of Tainos ended up hunting and farming, and they ended up creating that land for the sake of preserving, their cultural heritage in terms of what they needed to do to maintain their survival, which their survival was very, it was very tropical, as you can see, within certain historical artifacts where a lot of like their hunting, gear that they ended up creating, they made a lot of spears where they were able to hunt for fish. They went out spear fishing. A lot of them went canoeing, so therefore they can go after bigger game, that being sharks, that being crocodiles, also manatee, or the actual term for like a manatee. That's a Taino word. If you guys actually want to know how to speak other Taino words, you can go to Casa Areto's page. She has a lot of good information for that, where she can break down how the Taino language is to be spoken. I actually know a good load of Taino words, to actually say. But if you guys want to learn how to say, let's just say, shark. If you want to learn how to say shark, to say shark, you actually say kajaya. And then if you want to say crocodile or alligator, you say kaiman. So kaiman is Kai and Man. That's how you say kaiman. And then to say fish, you say hemeke. Yeah, that's the proper pronunciation. You say hemeke. So that's just like a few words that I personally know, but I actually know like how to say certain sentences, like hello, how are you? My name is Kieran. Like what are you doing today? Like I mean, there's stuff like that I'm still learning, but I mean the language alone is very prominent within a lot of cultural traits within well, I'm gonna say within Puerto Rico, the DR, and Cuba, where not a lot of people actually understand what they're saying in certain slang, but the slang has been transferred over within Spanish dialect within people that basically communicate with one another, whether Cubans are talking with Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. So that's just kind of like a basic, generalized understanding of like what I can kind of break that down. But yeah, but before I get into that, well, as I try to break that down further, when it comes to the settlements with what the Tainos have done, they've made a really strong, civilization in terms of creating their own farms, homesteading property, understanding science with navigating the stars or understanding the paths of stars. So therefore, they can actually tell, what's happening with the, you know, I should say the science of breaking down the astronomy of like where star paths go and understanding like the patterns of the moon. Yeah, they have like a really very interesting lifestyle with understanding the concept of like what their heritage actually practice on trying to be self-reliant people and actually trading with their other cultural counterparts where there was at least five tribes within the Taino nation. um that being the Arawaks, that being their like their mother ancestor, going back to Venezuela and all the other countries that I had mentioned throughout South America, and then the subnet tribes that they had, that being the Wayu people. I think the other people were called the Aneri people. The Aneri, I think that's one of the tribes, and then I'm trying to think of the other tribes. Man, oh man, like my memory always gets screwed up every time when I'm trying to think about them. But there's like a whole bunch of them out there, and I totally forgot, what they were. But if you guys definitely go take a look at, their heritage in terms of what they are and what their bloodlines actually had, they have like a massive bloodline in terms of like how many other tribes were technically related to them and how many of their peoples were kind of spread out. I mean, there's other tribes within the Arawak bloodline, like the Lakono tribe, and I think the Guarani tribe. They're actually related to the to the Arawaks. They're just different in terms of they kind of settled in different bloodline traits, so that kind of carried over time. So I mean, for the most part, those American Indian tribes within South America pretty much had similar concepts, between different family tribal members. So different tribal heritages basically shared pretty much of the same similar things, like within their bloodline. So that's quite interesting to kind of like take a look at that nobody doesn't take a look at for. So yeah, I mean, overall, that's just kind of like a general spiel of like trying to kind of like break that down. But another thing that was quite interesting in terms of learning about the Taino is that historically, a lot of them have traded, very, very heavily amongst the Caribbean, where they go on their canoe boats, or I want to say their rafts of however that they did, going over there. They traded a lot with a lot of their with a lot of other Caribbean, yeah, with a lot of other Caribbean islands that they have settled. That being with Puerto Rico, Cuba, the DR, Haiti, Jamaica, Bahamas, Turks and Caicos. I think St. Croix was actually in that conversation. And then there's also, U.S. Virgin Islands, and I think St. Vincent is also in that conversation too. The I know that the lands that the Kalinago have settled in were in nations like, well, that was like mostly in the Lesser Antilles, that being like Barbados. I want to say Dominica. I think Saint Vincent could be in that conversation. I'm not too entirely sure because I don't focus on knowing more about the Kalinago, because that were like those people were to be the Tainos. Like basically they were the competition to to the Taino being their rivals because what ended up happening with the Kalinago and the Taino is that the Kalinago they didn't have like a proper structure in forming their own society, so they ended up trying to steal resources from from the Taino, and the Taino they obviously will trade with other people if it suits their political interests or their economic interests. I'm sorry, disregard that part. Um, where they're trying to, basically bond with those that they can try to be friends with, and then if they are a good ally to that person, they will help, those particular people out. But with the Kalinago, they were not like that. They were ending up trying to steal their resources, trying to steal their women, and trying to, enslave them. So then, therefore, they went to war with them to actually kill them because, they were committing crimes up against their own people. So for a good most part, most of the Caribbean was dominated by the by the Taino people, and a good portion of them lived a lifestyle of live and let live. But if you do mess with me or you mess with any of my relatives, then they will be ready to fight if they have to. So the Kalinago, they were more like on the offensive, while the Taino, they were on the defensive because they don't really need to go to war with anybody. The problem is that a lot of people think that they were basically one and the same, and therefore these people were just kind of like, oh well, this is what everybody all acted like, and that's just like the European concept of like you're just gonna put people all like now all into one category, because you guys are not really saying anything, very very interesting for what's being done. So, I mean, overall, that's pretty much it. Um, for that. But let's just kind of break down everything else because I don't want to go into like a whole history lesson about what was going on with the people. But leading up to the Spanish invasion of like what people try to say that, oh well, this is where their bloodlines were having to be ended by the Spanish, and the Spanish took everybody out and blah blah blah, like all the stupid shit that's all politically retarded at the end of the day. And to break this down simpler is that yes, during the Spanish invasion, when the Spanish thought that they were going to win in the early 1400s or the late 1400s by 1492, when the Spanish had tried to conquer nations like Puerto Rico, the DR, um, Cuba, Jamaica, and Haiti at one point, which not a lot of people know that, but basically the Spanish did control them at one point until the French and the British, where the French they bought Haiti, where the Spanish gave that up to them, and then for Jamaica, Jamaica was owned by Spain, and then the British ended up going to war with them by the 1600s, and then Britain ended up taking it over for the time being. So, I mean, for the most part, the whole deal is that there's really no connotation of like what people really know what they're saying about their about all these wars that the Europeans had particularly started. And the thing is that when the Europeans were going over to the Caribbean to try to quote unquote be the explorers or to go out of like their way to colonize that particular region, they ended up thinking that they were winning, the whole particular war. And the whole thing was that they weren't really doing much of anything but going out of like their way, thinking that they can just take as much land as they want, and then they'll somehow be the victors, and they're never going to have any particular resistance. And the thing is that there's really nothing to really be said there because it's not true. And the thing was is that when the Taino, when they were ending up having to, retreat their forces to go up against, the Spanish and to kind of regroup their population, they ended up moving over to the mountains. where, within regions of Puerto Rico, the DR, and Cuba specifically, a lot of them went over to the mountainside regions where the Spanish thought that they had won the war, but they did not win the war. And a lot of what the people that they tried to a lot of what the women that the Spanish tried to force them to be their wives or to put them in a position where they ended up choosing to marry, that the Spanish, and the men that ended up dying that were probably once their husbands and they had kids with them. Like the children alone, they were obviously forced under Spanish rule under a certain point of time. But at this point, this is where the bloodlines were having to be divided and to be split, because under the Spanish colonial rule, under the Spanish crown, came with the Spanish, caste system, or the Spanish casta system, and the caste system was very stupid. The thing was is that Spaniards claim to say that the Spanish caste system was to be a system where that only Spanish bloodline can be basically dominant within a area in which, if you are Spanish, you have the basically let the political privilege or the political skin privilege to basically be dominant over other people. And what the Spanish had done with the system is that if you try to intermingle with other races, or you're trying to keep with your own race, that was considered to be a crime, because, they want you to be separated away from your people, and they want to make sure that they put you like no they put you within a particular position of which they want to try to keep as much racial mixing to a very low degree. Well, actually, no. They were for forcing people to be mixed with their with their other races. The stupid thing about it was that if you were obviously an indigenous American Indian like a Taino that were trying to organize your own people together to be divided from the Spanish, then the Spanish would try to immobilize their forces. Well, no, not immobilize. They would try to mobilize their forces together to force you out. So therefore, they can try to tell anybody within the community, oh, these Taino were bad people. Don't trust them. Blah blah blah. And these people need to be shunned away from a society. And they tried doing that for quite a long time, and it didn't really work, because the thing was is that a lot of the mixed Hispanics within Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the DR, they ended up fighting up against these Spaniards, and when they realized that these people are not really helping them, and in the Taino they were actually in the right, where they ended up having to spread their messages by trying to teach people about who they are as a people, and why them being invaded as a culture was actually in the wrong from the Spanish. The Spanish ended up losing their political support over time, where they were not winning the war. They were actually losing a lot of battles, where these battles were in which the Taino, they ended up killing a lot of Spaniards in response to them. They ended up going out of their way to mobilize more political support from the people that were mixed race Hispanics, and therefore, that led to the political evolution of, El Grito de Lares, the Dominican Revolution, where I forgot what revolution that was, but that's when the DR went out of its way to basically kill the Spaniards, and then they ended up winning the battle in 18. I want to say 1848. I forgot. I mean, like I definitely know what it is, but I keep forgetting what the year when the DR ended up reclaiming its own independence. But yeah, that definitely took a lot of battle and might coming from the support of. I want to say Venezuela supported the DR's independence. I think Bolivia did that. I mean, Simon Bolivar definitely supported the liberation, the liberation of the Caribbean. So he wasn't perfect all the way through, but that's when other political leaders came into that picture, and then they ended up helping people out. So, I mean, the DR had their independence to be reclaimed in like 1848 or somewhere within the 1840s. Yeah, between the 1840s and the 1850s. I know Haiti, they got their independence within. Ah, man, I totally keep on forgetting. I think it's 1841 or 1842. But I just keep forgetting that shit. But yeah, I mean, Haiti kind of did like did what they had to do with the French, and obviously let the black slaves ended up subjugating more to the French influence, and the Spanish influence was to be gone by then. And Jamaica, they got their independence through through the UK back in 1961. So that was like at least like a good like I want to say like 400 to 500 plus years, which that was quite interesting of like why they didn't do that. I'm actually gonna make like a video talking about why didn't Jamaica fight for their independence a lot earlier. That'll be a pretty interesting video to probably talk about one day because I've always wanted to kind of talk about that with historical commentary. But yeah, I'm gonna save that for another video coming into the future. But yeah, leading up to the particular means of the Taino, leading up to the Spanish invasion, yes, a good portion of their population had unfortunately died off, where a lot of Spanish people were trying to, take them down and think that, okay, if we try to kill as many as we can, then therefore we will settle however we can go about reproducing our population, however we can do it, because Spaniards, they were kind of coming in small numbers, and then once they had some control, then they started to bring in millions of more people to try to, basically bridge that gap where there were more whites living into the island. And the thing was is that they were not really winning with their population. Their population that were coming in were a lot of Europeans that were thinking that they were going to be safe having to reproduce more. But what ended up happening is that they just ended up creating a whole, melting pot of different racial cultures that they tried to say that they were going to prevent with the Spanish caste system, where a lot of blacks they ended up intermingling with like a lot of Hispanic women, that being like the Spanish, Taino mixes, where, the mestizo people or or basically the mix Hispanic indigenous breed people, which, this is very common within North America too. Obviously, with the Europeans and the North American Indian tribes within the U.S., but that's like a story for like a different day to kind of discuss about that. But the thing was is that once that had happened, the Taino people that people say that were gone were ending up to be split away from the rest of the population, that being within Puerto Rico, the DR, and Cuba, where they reside mostly within the mountains. Like, not a lot of people know where exactly that they are. And I would probably say to this day they are very well hidden because they're trying to keep their population to be more decentralized, and I can definitely understand that. And to a certain degree, people like to say, oh, well, if they're never to be around, then that means that most of them are just gone anyway. And that's really not true. Like, a lot of DNA studies actually have broken this down. And I know specifically within Puerto Rico, I want to say at least up to 61% of the maternal DNA gene pool of the Taino, of the Taino people was to be up to 61% within females. So that could very well mean that within the female gene pool, a lot of them have been producing more children back with their own, tribal men that they're with. So if we ever do see more, Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Cubans that are Taino, but they just don't express more of it, then to a particular degree they are here. It's just that they're currently within the minority where they settle. And a lot of races that actually end up lying about them say that, oh well, if they are to be here, they would have been said that they are here. And the thing is that they are here. It's just that the Spanish have tried to shun them away, and then people try to believe in all these like colonial European lies to say that they're not here when they clearly are here. So to kind of make this simpler, like a lot of people would like to say, well, how much of them are left? Well, it's not how much of them are left. How much of them by population percentage are to be settling within the Caribbean? To a particular degree, there's not a exact number, but to kind of make it simple as a general percentage concept, there could be at least up to 15 to 20% of their population to be within Puerto Rico, the DR, and Cuba. That is to be basically spread within every nation to be divisible, amongst amongst each other. Now, for Haiti and Jamaica, obviously most of them have probably ended up leaving, or the ones that did end up surviving, or they probably ended up dying out because they weren't able to kind of like produce as much children due to diseases and yeah, diseases and whatnot. I would probably say that's probably at a very low minority as of right now. And the same thing with the Bahamas and the U.S. Virgin Islands and all the other islands. But then again, it's very unknown because not a lot of people don't really know where they are. So, you know, to a certain to a certain degree, they could very well be somewhere within the particular area that we don't know where they are. Repopulating their own population. So they could very well be out there. It's just that people don't know where they are. So, to a certain degree level, they are in existence, and not a lot of people really acknowledge them because, a lot of people don't do the research to actually know, where they actually are. So, I would say to me, they are very well much alive, and the thing is that you know, no political racist outsiders need to say anything about them because if they are here and they are saying that they are there, and the Europeans are just trying to disclaim them to say that they're not there, people need to stop believing in that, and then obviously other like racist coons like to come into the picture, whether that could be black people to say like, well, where are they, man? I don't know where they are, but I haven't seen them. No, they are there. And the thing is that just because that you haven't seen them doesn't mean that they are there within disguise where people don't know where they are, and they're actually there. They're actually there. How should I say, setting up their own civilization with their own people. So I say to a certain degree, a good portion of them do heavily exist. It's just that not a lot of people ever understand what they're doing because the thing is that people don't know where their whereabouts are, for the most part. Now, as far as their genetics, as far as what Puerto Ricans and Cubans and Dominicans mostly do look like, yeah, to a particular degree, everybody is pretty diverse, and there's a huge distinction where you will see Cubans, Dominicans, and Puerto Ricans that will look white on one end, and then you have Tainos on the other end, and then you obviously have African breeds that are mixed, either that being Hispanic, or just being purely African or homogeneously African. So, there are distinctions of which people want to, live their life, and they kind of like settle based off of that. So, that is there, and that does particularly, exist, which I'm not to which I'm not particularly disputing that. It's just that a lot of people just think that, well, the European bloodline is so prominent that everybody at this point can just call themselves white, and that's not true. Like the Spanish population is like at least like what I want to say at least 55 to 60%, which I don't even think that that's actually true because the thing is like what's really considered white in Puerto Rico and the DR and Cuba, and what's considered to be Hispanic. Because if you're like Taino mixed with Spanish blood, and therefore, let's just say that's considered white, that's not really considered white. That's basically like a hybrid, mix, Hispanic breed. So to a certain degree, at this point, it's a very diversified culture. So it's not really something that a lot of people really talk about because they're like very disingenuous about what the what the demographic criteria is to be met for being white, black, or basically whatever. And therefore, to a certain degree, actually Asians are actually within that category too, where Asians actually have settled within Puerto Rico, DR, DR, and Cuba, where those are people of like Chinese, descent, and then a few people of like Japanese, descent, which I don't even like. I've never seen anybody like that at all, but their heritages are very small to the point where nobody's not really acknowledging that at all. But it's like they're not really there. It's the same thing like with the Arab population too. So just to kind of make things a little bit simpler, when it comes to understanding the Taino heritage, they're very well much alive. As far as evidence to show what they look like and who they are, if you guys ever want to see like actual Taino people, they are there within modern day with the people that I have shown in certain pictures. But also, if you guys want to know maybe prominent people that do have Taino blood, I mean, take a look at guys like Miguel Cotto. To say the least. I mean, he has his indigenous Taino looks, and I mean other people like who else, Amanda Serrano. She has very deep Taino features. There's another, well, those two were professional boxers. Another professional boxer that I'm actually friends with, Hector Camacho Jr.'s nephew. His name is Juan Carlos, Camacho, and yeah, he's extremely Taino. He's a really, he's very indigenous with what he looks like, and he does not have any like drip of European blood that's really shown in his heritage. And I'll actually show you a picture of him right now. Hold on, give me 1 second. Hello there, guys. I'm back. So yeah, this is Juan Carlos Camacho. This is the Puerto Rican fighter that I'm talking about. Yeah, like I'm actually friends with him. But yeah, he's extremely Taino. He does not look Spanish whatsoever, and the whole concept of the Tainos are dead argument, that's far from the truth, and that's clearly not there whatsoever. So I mean, anybody trying to say that their heritage is somehow just going away, that's some ultimate BS that only people of political ignorance would say. But if you guys want to see another one, I'll just type in, how about this? Yanquiel Rivera. He's very Taino, and his features look extremely like indigenous. Hold on. Well, hold on. I'm gonna type it in right there. Yeah, so like right here, if you take a look at his features, like basically as far as the features that do go, granted, not everybody is a 1-to-1 match, but if you look at it right here, very dark, very light brown tan skin. As far as the hair features, you can definitely see that a lot of his features are very, how should I say, dark black, thin silk hair, and he definitely carries a lot of features in terms of like what he has with who he is, as a how should I say, as the indigenous Puerto Rican or Baricua. And you could see within these features that the features are to be like light light darkish, well, no, not darkish, light tan brown, dark dark black silk hair and other features in terms of what they have. That's really like the whole like terminology of like how they're to be, determined as a bloodline. I mean, even Hector Camacho, to say the least, like, I mean, his Taino features were very deep within his roots too, and with his features, like he was like your typical like quote unquote brown skin Puerto Rican, or even if he was Cuban or Dominican. So, I mean, the thing is like the heritage is very well much alive, and for those that are mixed with with Taino blood and Spanish blood, you could see it within people, but that does not negate the fact that the people are very well there, and therefore they have a lot of they have like a lot of bloodline that is traced back to many different generations, like to come. So, to even go back to that whole sentiment argument that the Taino population is not there at all, that's a misunderstatement, and that is just another racist colonial concept that a lot of people like to do because people don't want to see certain tribes to exist because those people have strong knowledge, and they are a massive influence to other people at a global at a global level. So like to that, this is where I try to stand up for that because even for myself, even though y'all know me, I am black. Like, I'm not disregarding it. I know I do have Taino bloodline within my family lineage, even though that I am very Hispanic mix. So I know for my grandfather, for at least my non-biological, to say the least, which I'm pretty sure within my family members, I do have Taino relatives that I probably don't know because I haven't seen them and I wasn't really around my real grandfather's side, like my biological grandfather's side of the family. But to say the least, with my non-biological grandfather, he's extremely Taino, and he has all the features of what a Taino person looks like. Dark black, silk hair, very light tan, darkish brown skin, features. All the features that meets the qualifications of what a quote unquote American Indian looks like. I mean, some people like to say Native American, but Native American is not really true. It's like that's actually like a misunderstatement that a lot of people do say because they're not really smart with like how they're labeling, like the terminology. Because like when you say Native American is just a dumb term in terms of you're just native to the to the U.S. and that doesn't mean anything. Like, you are Indo-Asiatic Asian, so it's like by the terminology you are a Indian per se. And I'll probably even talk about that, like where does the term Indian really come from, because I actually need to break that down one day, because a lot of people like to lie about that terminology. But the thing is that to me personally, the terminology is Indian. It is American Indian because you are within the North American region, and you are the like that is the I should say indigenous like in a settlement of what those people are to be viewed as. Now, granted, if you want to call yourself Locono, or you want to call yourself how should I say Apache, or who else? Like the Sioux Indians out of North America, or the Comanche, or the Anasazi tribe. I mean, that's up to you. Like, that's up to those people. But to a generalized context, American Indian makes perfect sense because people have there's many different tribes that represent many different identities, so people have a difference in terms of what they believe in. Now, specifically with the Taino, they will very well call themselves to be Taino, and those people that do have the homogenous bloodline, they are there for their own pure existence for who they are. So, yeah, to kind of summarize this, to kind of quickly break this down, the Taino population is prominent for what it is. Now, people that do lie about it to say that the Taino population is not there and therefore, it's like little bits and pieces of people that exist. That is not true, and those people are lying about it constantly every day because they are pushing colonial lies, and therefore they're doing it for the sake of basically trying to disregard the bloodline because they are divisive up against the Taino bloodline because they are not being honest, about the heritage, like whatsoever. So just to kind of break this down, I mean, the Taino heritage can very well be prominent within, the Caribbean once again. It's just that where it stands right now, they are a sitting minority that is keeping their population intact for what it is. And, if there ever comes a time where they actually end up rebuilding their population to the point where the Spanish population ends up getting killed off, or basically they end up getting, I guess outpopulated. I don't know. I mean, there will be a massive distinction of seeing, Dainos within the Caribbean compared to like your average Hispanic or just a regular Spaniard that's living within the Caribbean. So I do believe that is to be true. So it's like, there is a massive, a distinction between that. But as far as people trying to say that, oh well, they'll never get to where they are to be, and you're being disingenuous. No, like those people are the ones that are racist, and they deserve nothing but violent punishment towards them because those people are the ones being divisive, and they are the ones that are pushing for the imperialist evil that was unjustified, to begin with. So yeah, that's pretty much it, man. I mean, I just wanted to kind of explain that little history spiel of the Taino people. They have a very interesting bloodline. Their language is very beautiful, and if you guys want to check out those content creators with people like Casa, Areto on YouTube, you could also take a look at uh, there's another YouTuber called Taino Funhouse. That's a DJ Sanakori. He's a very good YouTuber. I actually like watching him. Some of his videos are very informative. Other videos are kind of like virtue signaling ish type of videos, which I don't really care for that. I just care about the facts. So I like people like him. You could also take a look at Amanax that Puerto Rican Instagrammer that does like a lot of Taino cultural content. With what he does. So yeah, I mean he's a really good YouTuber. Like there's plenty of great Instagram slash social media influencers or content creators that actually focus on the heritage a lot. So that's what I like to do to kind of like spread that information and just be informative. I don't play this whole political virtue signaling nonsense that a lot of people like to do, and I think it's very evil and very disgusting that people do that because that is a Marxist way, of thinking. So a lot of people do think like that because they want to try to be divisive and use people to kind of like virtue signal off of them. So if they do that, then they go out of their way trying to be very disingenuous about other people's heritages, and then on top of that, they're committing history theft to use like basically racist lies that are mostly generated from Europeans to kind of be divisive up against other people for that particular regard. So yeah, I'm not like that whatsoever. I care about the facts. I don't lie, about my heritage, and like I'm proud for who I am. Not only as a Puerto Rican, but just a person that cares about my heritage. You know, granted, like, I care about being black, but I don't care about all this, like, evil collectivism that a lot of blacks will try to push for. So, yeah, that's pretty much where I stand for that. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think. I will see you guys later. I got some things that I got to do, but I will see you guys later. Hope you have a great day. And long live the Taino people, aka the people of Borican, Haiti, Jamaica, um, who else? Quisqueya, and, Bahama, and, many other islands throughout the Caribbean. So, yeah, so I will see you guys later. Long live the Arawak peoples, and I will see you guys later. All right, peace and almighty blessings. All right, I'll see you guys later. Peace out. Bye.